Hello, today's lesson extension 6.5. It's about reflecting points in the coordinate plane. I'm going to skip the warm-up just to make this video lesson a little bit shorter, but you can check the answer key for the notes to see the answers to A and B. Okay, so we're reflecting points in the coordinate plane. I want you to look at these pictures and see that these are all reflections, right? And the idea is I can figure out kind of where the line of symmetry or the line of reflection is by noticing where the real picture ends and the reflection starts. So it's kind of cool to take pictures with water as a background, because if it's flat, the surface of the water will reflect the sky or buildings and things like that. So we're looking at reflections right now. And all reflections have a line of symmetry. And sometimes the line is vertical, sometimes it's horizontal, but sometimes it can also be at an angle, right? Like this butterfly right here. It's going off at like a 45-degree angle. And so we're going to be reflecting points across the line of symmetry. Okay, so to reflect a point in the x-axis, you're going to use the same x-coordinate, and you're going to take the opposite of the y. And the way I think about it is, if my original point is 2, 3, it's going to be reflected. It's like it's skipping across this line, or it's jumping over this little line of reflection that I have here. Oops, the red line is with it. And so if it's above the line, the reflection in the x-axis will be below the line. And then I want you to notice that the y value went from positive to negative. If this had been my original point down here, let's say this was my original, I'm going to change it to green. If this was my original point and this was my reflection, either way, the value for the y changes to the opposite. Okay, now we can also reflect in the y-axis, right? So now I have a line of symmetry or a line of reflection that goes vertically. And what we do is we use the same y-coordinate and we take the opposite of the x. So I want you to notice that the x value changes. In this one, the original point was on the left, and now it's on the right. So if you want, you can put your pencil on this line of reflection and picture the point jumping over that line. Okay, so here we go. Here's an example where we're going to reflect this point in the y-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight in the x-axis. I'm highlighting the x-axis. And my point starts up here, and you have this on your paper as -2, 4. Well, the reflection is on the other side of that line of symmetry or reflection line. And it is down where the the y value went from positive to negative. So the new point is -2, -4. And so I write it like this: -2, 4 is reflected to -2, -4. That's kind of some fancy language to use when you're writing about how a reflection starts out and ends up. Okay, so here's your two OYOs. You might want to take a highlighter and highlight the x-axis, because that's the line that the point is going to jump over. I start by plotting. You should pause this, try it on your own, but if you don't know what to do, then go ahead and unpause the video. So I'm going to start out with this point, 3, -4. I go over 3, down 4. That's where it is. I know it has to jump over the x-axis. So it was below the line. It needs to be reflected above the line. It was 4 down, so I know it needs to be 4 up, and it ends up here. So +3, -4 is now reflected as +3, +4. And just like I mentioned, it's the y value that goes to the opposite. Okay, now I have a tricky one. It's 3, 0. So I go over 3, and 0 says stay in the same place. That point is already in the x-axis, so there's nowhere to rotate it to, right? It can't flip up or down, so it stays where it is. That is the reflection because it's already in the x-axis. No change. Okay, now here's a reflection in the y-axis. So I can highlight the y-axis like that. This time, the point, if it's on the left, which it is, it's going to be reflected over to the right. So notice that it's 1, 2, 3 spaces to the left. So it stays on this same horizontal line and goes 1, 2, 3 spaces over to the right. So I end up with positive 3, negative 1. So my reflection went from negative 3, negative 1, to positive 3, negative 1. So this time the x value is changing to the opposite. Okay, here's your OYO. Pause the video and try these on your own. I'm going to go ahead and, oops, not that. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the Y and the, whoops, that's the bad one. Okay, so here we go. The point is negative 4, 1. I start off with negative 4, positive 1. That's where I start. This time the reflection needs to hop over. Now we're going left to right to reflect across the y-axis. If it was 4 over to the left, it'll be reflected 4 over to the right. So I started with negative 4, 1, and the reflection goes to positive 4, positive 1. This one is 0, 2. It's again like that other tricky one on the x. If it's already in the y-axis, there's nowhere for it to be reflected. 0, 2, the reflection is the same. Okay, so now we're going to try something tricky. We're going to reflect in both axes. We're going to take one point and reflect it twice. And this is the most common error that people make. They go back to the original point. Because the instructions say to reflect in the x followed by the y, that means I want you to go to the new point, don't go back to the old point. So here's the example. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the y-axis, and I'm going to highlight the x-axis, and then I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to go, okay, then my first reflection, it was above the line, it's going to hop below, and then it's to the right, so it's going to go to the left. All right, so notice this is 1 point above the line. It'll be reflected 1 point below the line. And now it's 2 spaces over to the right, so it's going to be 2 spaces over to the left. That's where I end up. So 2, 1 was reflected to negative 2, negative 1. That's interesting. The x, first in this one, the y went negative. Okay, so what happens is the reflection changes. All right, sorry about that. My computer was just about dying. Here we go. This is your OYO reflecting in the x-axis and then the y-axis. I'm going to highlight my x with one color and my y with a different color. Okay, so here's my point. Negative 4, 3. I'm going to first reflect across the x and then across the y. So if it's up 3, the reflection will be down 3. If it's to the left 4, the reflection will be to the right. So negative 4, 3 reflects to positive 4, negative 3. The next one is negative 1.5 and negative 1.5. It's not a pretty point, it's right in the middle, but it's going to go across the x and then across the y. So here it goes across the x and then across the y. So negative, oops, I did that wrong. Maybe you were paying attention and I wasn't. Negative 1.5, negative 1.5 is right there. When it goes across the x, it goes up and then it goes right. Sorry about that. Okay, so my point goes up here and then it goes over here. So negative 1.5, negative 1.5 reflects to positive 1.5, 1.5. Okay, so I want you to notice that in each of these, the x changed, or sorry, the y coordinate changed first and then the x. So here's our last final wrap it up. Notice that when you reflect a point in the x-axis and then in the y-axis, both coordinates change to the opposite. Okay, homework is informative. Good luck.